few quick housekeeping notes before we get started. So the next strategy webinar is going to be on the 29th of May, and that is at 11 a.m. London time, 4 p.m. BT. We do have another one coming up for that afterward, which is the 5th of June as well. I will go ahead and drop the registration links into the chat once we get going for both of those. So would love to see you if you can make the time zones work. I know with APJ it's a little hard, that 11 a.m. London time, but those are the next couple sessions that we have coming up. And for today, we have two amazing speakers for you. So I will go ahead and introduce them. So we have Greg Baxter, who is the head of growth and marketing at Codehouse. Hey, Greg. And Greg today is going to be talking about personalization opportunities across the Sitecore product set. So I know that we were talking about this, and this is something that people ask a lot, kind of which tool can I use for personalization? What's the best way to approach that? So that's a really exciting piece we're going to hear from him. And then Cade is the head of client services and digital strategy at ASIC. Hey, Cade. And he's going to cover off the why and how of building web pages using XM Cloud components. So another really great piece for us to talk about today. So I will, with that, hand it over to Greg. Feel free to take it away, Greg.
Fantastic. Just bear with me while I share my screen and we will go from there. Please let me know when it's all full screen and full of goodness.
You are good to go.
Fantastic. So hello, everybody. Thank you very much for spending some time listening to us. My name is Greg Baxter. As Megan said, I've been around the Sitecore product set for a very long time, nearly 20 years. I was one of the very early founding members of Sitecore APAC and ended up working at business optimization strategies for a really long time. And one of the questions that I get is, so which tools should we use? And of course, it used to be which rules should we use back in the monolith XP days, but now it's very much about what product might work for me and what's actually in these new products. So I thought I would go about putting together a presentation around that. Quick word around Codehouse. We're a purebred Sitecore agency. Our founders are both ex-Sitecore. We've been around since about 2005. The greater global team collectively has won around 14 Sitecore Experience Awards, and we are very much around aligning technology design and personalization to boost marketing and business outcomes. And of course, as a company that only does Sitecore, we very much love the product, and we do work with companies that have traditional. And of course, we're now in the composable world, and we rolled out the first XM Cloud plus Site project in our region. So we got a lot of work done early on with XM Cloud, which kind of raises the question of, what do we do with XM Cloud in terms of personalization? How does it compare with what we could do in XP? And I thought I would put this together. And it turns out there is a bewildering amount of choices and decisions that we kind of need to make. And that's across XP with the CMS only variant, a whole bunch of XM SaaS and XM Cloud variants. And of course, what do we do when we overlay personalize on top of that? And I'll finish this up by really just talking about what I think, depending on what kind of customer you are, whether you've got a huge investment in custom code on XP or a lot of really heavy integration, what can you do to still take advantage of the composable world? So there's a little bit of a closer that sort of says, what I believe is where a number of different sort of clients ought to look next. So if we look at kind of the landscape of it, it really exploded as soon as Sitecore moved to its composable direction. I personally think it was a fantastic idea. I know Cade has also used these tools a lot, and they're fantastic to use, but there's still a lot of what is it kind of stuff out in the market, and it can really lead to a bit of a brain-blowing explosion where our customers saying to us, oh, I'm on XP, it's got this, that, and the other, what do I do? Should I move to personalized? Do I buy CDP? So we're fielding these kinds of questions all of the time. So I thought I'd put this kind of quick overview of what each of these things really does together so that we've all got a level playing field to make these decisions from. So it won't surprise you that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on XP. It's been around for a very, very long time. I suspect most of us on this call understand the tool set or the rule set, if you like, inside XP. The main takeaway from it is it's a large tool set. So over on the left, you can see kind of like a whole bunch of rules that are available to be used. And I'm just going to click on it and scroll through. So the screen before had a whole bunch. Now there's some IP, geolocation stuff. There's marketing automation capability, system stuff, tracking, venue, visit. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time pulling all of that apart because we would be here, for a month in order to do that. And what I really want to do is really cement the fact that XP, even though it might be considered, older technology at this point in time, still had a phenomenal amount of power and really led to a lot of really tremendous project wins. So when you see numbers like Nissan increasing test drives 150%, which would be a really core metric for a business like that, or L'Oreal having 150% bump in e-commerce, these are kind of big numbers. There isn't a marketer alive who would not be happy to see some of that stuff. And at least 3 of those slides I was involved with, 3 of those businesses. So I've always been a fan. There is no problem at all using the XP tool set. And not so long ago, Cade and I actually worked together on 3 projects, and we managed to get some really great results out of it. And it was a pleasure working with him, and it was a pleasure working with the product, as it always is. So there's a bunch of key takeaways here, and the key takeaway really is that there's still a huge amount of capability in XP. There is nothing that it doesn't do, I think, really, compared to the more modern tools. It's just a different way of doing it. It's a different interface and all of that sort of stuff. And there are a couple of variants here around XP that you need to know about. When Sitecore or an agency talks about CMS only, they really mean that XDB has been deprecated from that particular solution. So that means anything that really tracks longer term customer history is simply not there. So you can still do personalization, of course, but it is only within that kind of session. So there's no long-term memory that a user came to the website 2 weeks ago and downloaded a brochure, for example, that might show you where they are in the purchasing cycle. That content does not exist for you to tap into. So those that have heavy customization and integration with XP, and it might take them a while to move that platform over to the more modern composable world, still have plenty of tools with which to do personalization and testing. And also there is nothing to stop you from rolling, say, personalize or CDP over the top of the old XP and run a hybrid kind of option. And that was done pretty successfully, which we'll talk about in a second. So the really great divide between XM Cloud without CDP or Sitecore with a CMS only is that it really just doesn't have the memory of what visitors do. Personalization is restricted to the session, and there's no visitor footprint beyond a limited number of days. And here's just a quick example and a recent example from last year about a hybrid kind of project that I believe was done by Pingworks. Our friends over there do fantastic work. I'm not a believer in, agencies being competitors. I think we all do tremendous work, and certainly the team over there are great. And the stuff they did with Destination Gold Coast, again, are the kind of numbers that we would all want. 119% increase in conversions, and 164% bump in biz leads for the area as a tourist destination. And that is a XP running with composable DX on top of it. So a mixture of CDPP, Send, and Content Hub. So if you have XP and it is a bewildering monolith or behemoth in order to shift, then you can just roll the newer tools right over the top. But in my view, sooner or later, you will probably move to XM Cloud as that product really starts to expand its capability in that composable world. So we'll quickly jump over to XM Cloud. So a really super duper high level view is that XM lets you personalize the user experience, again, based on current visit, not historical. And it's a really different way of doing things to the old way in XP, which is all about data sources and, essentially components swapping in and out. So personalization in XM and XM Cloud is undertaken at page level. But of course, at page level, you swap out the components with different page variants. You can replace a component with another one that's compatible to a personalization rule. You can hide a component and do all of that sort of stuff. And of course, revert back to default content if needed. So it's a slightly different approach, if you like. But at the end of the day, it's like the magician sawing the lady in half. It's kind of the same trick, even if it's handled a little bit differently. So personalization in this case is anonymous. Memory is limited to the last 30 days. And the audience builder is really, a key tool. And I don't have quite enough time to go into that today. And it's I would recommend everyone just jump in and play an experiment in an XM Cloud or an XM Sandpit, because it's a great deal of fun. And there are basic analytics available. It's not the level of analytics that a marketer would be really used to seeing in Google Analytics. So we'll probably still be doing, the GA4 view and the Sitecore view of analytics. And as long as they're within CUI, it's not really a problem. So to take a look at what we can actually do natively, there are a whole bunch of ready-to-go conditions that sit in XM and XM Cloud. Point of sale, country, region, day of the month, day of the week, month of the visit, first referrer, all the usual stuff we're used to really building our personalization logic around. And if I were to extrapolate a list from, let's say, XP of maybe the things I do most frequently, they would be contained in this ready-to-go outcomes or ready-to-go conditions within XM and XM Cloud. So they've kind of picked the ones that I would use the most, to be honest, unless I was moving into custom rule development. So all of these rules, of course, have a whole bunch of variables: is, has not, a whole bunch of Boolean capability, is equal to, greater to, less than, which really gives you the ability to create very complex rules, even with a kind of what might appear to be a limited condition set. But anyone who's done a lot of personalization knows that less is more, and that there are a whole bunch of things that you do over and over and over. And I do believe that most of these ready-to-go conditions contain most of that. So a couple of demystifiers is not a really bad idea. What Sitecore is now calling point of sale is the old site identifier. So you're pointing at a repository or a website, if you like. The visitor is in a region is another one of these things, which can be a little bit opaque, but regions are predicated down to Africa, Asia, Europe, North America, Oceania, South America, and other. So I'm not sure. Cade was probably a little bit better to ask whether that can be customized. I suspect so, it being Sitecore and all. And of course, if it's the country, it's the usual great big list. It starts with Azerbaijan or whatever and ends with Zululand or kind of whatever, right? So it's a great big list of countries. Campaign is the typical UTM thing that works much the same as it did back in XP's day. So you append a UTM to a link, and Sitecore knows that somebody has come from that campaign and that channel, and can start to personalize based on that campaign link. Of course, if you append this to CDP, all of that information is stored. In just straight XM Cloud, it is just a personalization trigger, essentially. And of course, people looking at sites on a particular page view, a lot of this is very self-explanatory. Operating system and device, honestly, I've kind of never actually used, although I can see a requirement around mobile. Number of page views is always very useful. And looking at a particular page. So in this example, if a customer has visited pricing page, that might be a trigger in your engagement value scale to say that they're edging close towards a purchase, and we might want to create or present and surface content that is relevant to somebody who is at the pointy end of perhaps purchasing or a significant conversion on a website. So new and returning is another thing that we do a lot. A lot of companies do, a nice first message for a first-time user, and returning visitors get a different kind of message. So there's a whole bunch of stuff there that's super useful to use. And some of the key takeaways out of that is that could be considered entry-level personalization and analytics, but by goodness, you can do a lot of damage with them. It's a really, really good choice for establishing the case for optimization. I'm a big believer in, starting with maybe one kind of project or rule or tactic, proving the worth of the work in general, and then expanding the business case out. It doesn't require a big learning curve to do this. You can sit down with a sandpit and just, literally crack away, and you will understand it pretty quickly. Because it's free in the product, there is no executive decision. So the old barrier of, I don't know what personalization is going to bring to the business, therefore I'm going to sit on my thumb, doesn't really exist anymore. So you can really, push this out pretty quickly. And it has enough capability to establish that culture of continuous optimization. But ultimately, I feel that you're going to want more, and I think you're really going to want more very much in around the space of CDP capability. So if we take a look at Personalize, it's a standalone personalization thing. It's Sitecore's next-gen experimentation and personalization platform. It's, of course, powered by real-time data, intelligence decisioning, and all of that really great stuff. But if you boil it down, it's got kind of three real capability drivers. So you can do personalization, of course. You can do experimentation, which is the whole ABN testing play. And it contains, both of these things contain decisioning models. So the business rule decisioning lets you really manage complex kind of next step decisioning. It's based on the DMN standard, which is a decision model and notation standard. And of course, this is all built on the batch and stream Lambda architecture capability. So it gives us a great deal of power. It lets us personalize around web experiences, which is, of course, website stuff. It lets us personalize around information that might be pulled from back office systems. So there's a whole API layer that would let you personalize based on what somebody might have been registered as doing in a CRM or in a learning management system or some adjacent line of business system. And it lets you trigger emails to email service providers, so you can really create that beautifully cadenced personalization around what people are getting by email and what they're seeing on the website personalization. So experimentation is a really big deal in all of this, because we want to prove personalization, but we want to do testing in its own right anyway. And you can test around the usual stuff: navigation, menu, color schemes, text, font size, call to action, all of that kind of stuff. And there's a really well laid out sort of process to build experiments, and for that matter, personalization. So it's a matter of really following the user interface inside Personalize. And if you haven't seen it, I would strongly recommend you just jump in and really start to build stuff out. You will need perhaps some capability around putting together placeholder variants, but there's usually a developer friend that can, help you do that sort of stuff. But create the experiment, create the content, create the variant, set it up, decide who you want to see the experiment or the personalization, create into decisioning, align it to a goal, and off you go. So to really kind of summarize, there are a lot of people sitting there on their existing investments wondering where to go next. And this is just, of course, my view. If you're an XP customer with limited or no personalization, just chop off XDB and save that revenue and try and introduce CDPP, which is the customer data platform and personalization bundle, and start to really think about moving to a headless migration and move to XM Cloud while it's not so complicated to do it. If you're an XP customer with really heavy customization, tons of super integration, but still limited or no personalization, same story. Remove XDB, introduce CDP for the next step of your journey, and start to build out your composable solution, albeit with XP sitting as the connective tissue and the user interface. If you're an XP customer with extensive personalization, you have a couple of options there. You can export the XP data, and you can obviously archive it, or you can reintegrate it into CDP. I don't think that's a trivial operation, the reintegration, but of course, people moving from one product to another product are going to have to deal with those kind of challenges at any rate. If you're a new customer and you have a really aspirational DX roadmap, so you're a charger, you bought Sitecore and you're not going to, drive it like the figurative VW that we talk about forever. jump in. Absolutely, XM Cloud, CDPP, and I would strongly advise that you add Sitecore Send to it so that you can really curate and create a symphony of experiences across channel, and you have a really unbelievably powerful platform that will really future-proof your investment and let you move very comfortably into a composable world. And if you're a new customer with a limited DX roadmap, so you're not quite that aspirational, just start with the native personalization inside XM Cloud. Start that optimization culture and you're SaaS from day one, and hopefully you onboard the value of utilizing personalization, and then can look at introducing CDP or personalize when you've got some early wins and proof points on the board. So that's kind of my presentation. I will hand back now to Megan, and I'm looking forward to seeing Cade's presentation, and of course anything you want to add at the end or ask questions at the end, we're both more than happy to answer them. So thank you so much for your interest.
Thanks, Greg. That was great. That was really really insightful. Thank you so much for that presentation.
Right, made it. Whew.
You made it. Absolutely. No, that was great. I think there were a few questions in the chat that Cade actually answered for you, but we can maybe go through those at the end as well if there's any further follow-on questions from those. But in the meantime, Cade, feel free to take it away.
Awesome. I think I'm sharing now. Is that right?
You are. Yes. All good.
Okay, cool. All right, thanks for the warm-up, Greg. That was really interesting, and lots of choices and decision points there, but thanks for the way that you laid that all out for us. So in this session, we're going to be looking at a whole other capability within your DXP, and that specifically is going to be the whole space of front-end as a service. So we're going to be deep diving into Sitecore's offering, Sitecore's XM Cloud Component Builder. And I want to spend a fair chunk of time in actually demoing the product itself, so putting it through its paces. But before we get to the demo, I just want to make sure we're on the same page around what front-end as a service is, because it is a relatively new idea, new capability. And so we're going to just briefly touch on, what is it? How does it work? How does it change the way that we do digital and website building, and then why as digital strategists should we care? What's in it for us? And then we'll spend a fair bit of time doing a demo, and specifically with the demo, rather than just kind of spinning our wheels and looking at what it can do. I mean, we will do some of that, but I want to look at it in the context of actually building a real life website, and also look at it in the context of what are the most important features and capabilities we need as digital strategists from a front-end as a service solution. And so we're really road testing Sitecore's offering against those most important features, okay? And so that's what we're going to be walking through. So hopefully from today, you get a better idea of what front-end as a service is, and specifically what Sitecore's offering is as well, and perhaps an idea of how you can start walking towards integrating some of this capability within your digital strategies and implementations going forward. So I hope that all sounds okay. Just briefly, this is me. So I've been around Sitecore now for a couple of years and got a pretty extensive background in digital, not quite as long as Greg, but it's getting up there, and working as a digital strategist at the moment with ASIC, with a range of clients supporting them. Okay, so what is front-end as a service? So you can see the acronym here, FEAAS. I would say that would be up there as a contender in winning any awkward acronym awards. I don't even know how to pronounce it, so I just kind of spell it out in full every time I say it, front-end as a service. If you've got ideas how to pronounce it, maybe pop it in the chat. That might be helpful, because it is a bit of a mouthful. But if we're talking about definitions, so the simplest way of putting it is front-end in the cloud. Obviously, we're talking about a SaaS solution here. You can just kind of read through the definition that I'm putting forward. I've highlighted a couple of things to point out. So it is about managing the UI and UX of web applications or digital experiences. So it's important to point out it's not just about the UI, it's not just the look and feel of the website. When we're talking about a front-end as service capability, we want something that enables us to actually build out the interaction or the experience design of our website. So it's not just look and feel, it's actually interaction as well. So it goes a bit deeper. And then the second para there talks about how it's designed to simplify and streamline the development of the front end. So I assume that we're not hardcore coders in this call, but if you were, the whole idea of front end as a service should be raising the eyebrows of our front end engineers, because it is all about changing the way that we do front end development. Changing the process, changing the activities, changing the skill set. So it's potentially going to be quite significant once these tools reach a level of maturity. So as we go through the demo and just in a moment as well, but I'll explain a little bit more kind of how it will change, I think, the processes and why it's a good thing as well, what the benefits are. So front-end as service, relatively new, but it has been around in different forms for a few years. In its simplest form, you could even say that WordPress, with some of its advanced drag and drop WYSIWYG capabilities, is getting towards a kind of front-end as service capability. And then you've got services like Wix and Webflow and probably others that don't start with W, that enable you to do that kind of rich, easy drag and drop website publishing experience. So there's that kind of end of the spectrum with tools and capabilities that allow you to build stuff quickly without code, no code solutions. And then you've also got other types of solutions like Storybook, for example, at the UI end, that allows you to maintain a library of assets that in theory allows a developer to come in and pick up some code and reuse it quickly and simply and refer back to that single source of truth at any point in time. So again, Storybook in and of itself is not a front-end as service, but the idea of having that kind of common shared library, easy reference point, quick start kind of capability is all part of the mix of what comes together into front-end, in a front-end as service solution. So thinking about what the most important features are, so hopefully we gather that front-end as service can do all sorts of things. What are the most important features? Here's a list of 10. I think ChatGPT generated this for me. But again, just scan down through the list and you'll see some different things that hopefully make sense and help bring the picture together. So a library of UI components is there, responsive design, cross-browser compatibility, the ability to integrate with other back-end services, APIs, data sources, and so forth, collaboration tools, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we want our front-end as service solutions to be able to do in order to give us this ability to manage the front end in a different and no-code kind of way. But what's more interesting is looking at these features in terms of their priority or importance. So what I did was ask my network of digital practitioners if they had to rank these features from the most important to least, how would they rank them? And then, as I said at the top, we're going to look at Sitecore's offering through the lens of how it compares against these most important features. So the top most important feature is reusable templates and elements, or essentially components, right? So we want a solution that enables us to have components that we can quickly and easily reuse in multiple places and contexts and even sites. Code's got to be accessible, it's got to be responsive. They're the kind of table stakes, but they still make the list in terms of important features. And drag and drop. Everybody loves a good drag and drop interface. So that's the top 4. Again, just skim down through the list and see what else is there. But we're going to focus on that top 4 when it comes to looking at Sitecore's offering. So why care? Again, as digital strategists, we're not coding people most of the time. So these types of solutions are kind of in a way made for us. They enable us to do stuff without having to write code. And as I've said, you can drag and drop and reuse components to build pages and templates. And if you can do that, then you can build a site. And if you can build one site, you can build multiple sites, all with the potential of not needing to do any code. So it enables you to actually build your digital experience at scale across multiple sites through a centralized management of the shared components. And more than that, components don't have to just be static and text-based. They can actually be data-driven. So you can use your headless data source outside of your component library and actually be driving that data externally, making your components extensible and reusable in multiple contexts. And then again, by having a centralized library or reference point, that enables you to do UX and brand governance more effectively because you've got a single reference point to see at any point in time what is the UX and UI that we're provisioning across our digital experiences or within your front-end as service solution. So there's some pretty compelling reasons why we should care. And it's more than that as well. So the whole idea of having the ability to build components, pages, sites without code means that it changes the traditional workflow of building websites. So traditionally, you've got your UX team that do all the design and the creative stuff, and they come up with the final high-fidelity wireframes. And then there's some kind of handoff to the engineering team that pick it up. They have to interpret what was expected in terms of the requirements and the experience and then build that. But if you've got the ability to build stuff without code, then that means that your UX team or content authors potentially can actually run in parallel to your engineering team and actually be doing some of the site building, some of the simple site building using components at the same time as your engineering team is running in parallel, doing some of the back-end data integrations and some of the more complicated components. And so essentially you're running in parallel, which means that you're delivering your websites quicker, so faster time to market. And you've also got the capacity within your projects to actually do the fun stuff and the stuff that we would say actually moves the needle in terms of delivering better experiences and better outcomes by building in the analytics from day one and the optimization and the experience design. You've got that capacity within your projects because you're not bottlenecked and kind of running end to end with the different teams. Ultimately, which of course benefits the customer with the better experience and the business with a better return on investment and outcomes. So there's lots of reasons why this is potentially significant, why we could be popping the champagne bottles and living the dream if all the promises of front end as a service actually comes to fruition. So now it's time to actually test this out and look at Sitecore's offering. So I'm going to bring my browser window over. Hopefully you're still seeing my screen and you can see Figma now. I assume you can.
Yep, got it.
Yep, no worries.
Cool. All right, so let me walk you through kind of the end-to-end process of using Sitecore's Component Builder. And again, reminder that we're using a realistic scenario here of an actual website that we need to build. So we've come up with this fictional brand called Cover Insurance. They offer a range of insurance products. And we've had our UX team design the website in the fairly traditional way in Figma. So we can see all our different components here laid out on the page. We've got our type styles, here in Figma, our different color swatches, and then here at the component level, we can see our hero component here, our primary action bar here, promo, and our news carousel down here. So for the demo, we're going to focus on building this homepage hero, the action bar, and the news carousel. Okay. So that's what we start with. Now, what we've actually already done is build this site. Now, we actually built this site in the, let's say, traditional way, using React components. But then what I've done is actually rebuild the components using Sitecore's Component Builder so that we can compare what's the experience like and what's the outcome like building it in React versus Sitecore's Component Builder. But the website is all here and it's all functioning and everything kind of works. So that's what we'll be referring back to. Okay, so that's our designs, that's our finished site. I've got XM Cloud open here. I've got a new page called SMAC, and this is where we're going to build out our new components. Let's now jump into the Sitecore Component Builder tool. You can see it's called Components. It has, I think, had a couple of different names, Experience Studio and XM Cloud Components. Anyway, we'll just call it Component Builder. This is the action screen here where you do your components. But before we do that, there's some other steps you really need to follow before you get to building your components. And the first step here is under styles. And these are a range of different elements that need to come together so that you can build your components. And the one thing that I'd suggest you do is spend the time up front to really define all the different basics, rules, and elements that you're going to need to build out your components. And this is where you're going to be needing to refer back to whether it's Figma or whatever the UX team create to define everything in here in terms of your colors, your padding elements, your block elements, everything to do with your links and so forth, so that you've got all the building blocks in place so that when it comes to the components, it all just comes together really neatly. I was going to walk through each of these. I probably won't because it's really just a step-by-step process of going from the basics that come together to make the rules, which come together to make your elements or styles, and then are combined together into a theme. I will just kind of orientate you to what you can do here. So I've already created my font, which is Inter, and it's really simple to add new fonts. You used to be able to just pick Google fonts, but now you can actually add your own custom CSS, or you add your own font in here. So that's pretty powerful. The colors I've already defined. So I've grabbed our Clover colors here and created them. As close to code that you'll need to get is actually just knowing the hex code, which you can pull directly from Figma. And you can see that these are grouped. So that's a cover group, and that's base, ASIC brand. So these are collections, and these are just ways of grouping the different elements. You might think of them as site. So you might add a different collection per site. Graphics is an undocumented feature. Out of the box, you get a range of breakpoints. You can define your own. So they're the basics, and then they come together to create your typographies, where you're defining not just the font, but different types of font attributes. And then you bring in your backgrounds and your colors. Spacings, again, out of the box comes with a whole range. This will cover most use cases and get you out of trouble, but you can create your own spacings as well. And then those elements come together those bits come together to create elements, which are styles. So, for example, your text styles here, defining all your heading levels. Inline elements like buttons and links. Again, hopefully you're getting the picture that if you define all this stuff up front, then it's going to make it really simple to actually build your components based on these elements. And the block elements are your sections and cards, block quotes, for example. So you build up all your styles, and then the important thing is you can combine them into a theme. So a theme is just a collection of styles. And then when it comes to creating a component, rather than having to style each bit of that component, you can just apply a theme to the entire component, and it will automatically apply the right styling to each element within that component. So that's kind of cool, and I'll show you how that works. But the real benefit there is that means that you can apply a theme to each of your components, and then at some point down the line, when the inevitable rebrand comes, rather than having to go into each and every component and update the colors and the styles, you can just update your theme in one place, and that will roll out and apply your changes across your whole site or multi-site. So it's essentially the way that you would do that. We're essentially a replacement for what you would have done with CSS, but this time you're doing it without code. You're doing it through this system, which is pretty cool. So they're all our building blocks. So don't sleep on building out your styles. Data sources are where you add in an external reference for your components so that your components can be data driven through, for example, an external JSON file. And it's really as simple as pasting in your JSON URL and then retrieving the data structure here. And then you can use that within your component. Again, I'll demo that in just a moment. And that's really it. So then it comes to actually building the component. So let's jump in. We're going to start with our homepage hero component. Start editing, and we get our editing window here. So referring back to Figma, okay, we can see it's got a big background image. So that's the first thing I'm going to put into my component. Sorry for jumping through the tabs. I've got an image here that I've saved. So in the component builder, I'm in the section, which is the entire block. I'm going to go and add a background image. It's static, and there it is. Okay, the next thing I need to do is add in our heading, paragraph, and 2 buttons. So let me just walk. Actually, before I do that, I need to add a container, or a block rather. So let's add that in here, and let's make it full width. Okay, and now within that container, I'm going to add my heading, and then paragraph, and then I'm going to add 2 buttons side by side. And the easiest way of doing that is adding another block, and then making it a 2-column block, and then adding in a button. And then another button. And you can see it's just adding generic text each time you add an element, and that's helpful. And of course you can change that. So in our case, it's protecting what matters most. You can just type that in. I'll just leave the other placeholder text because you get the idea, you just edit that away. Now that's kind of coming together, I suppose. Let's refine it a bit further. So there's no gap between our 2 buttons here. So I need to navigate in the tree to the block that I created, and then add some spacing. And it's a horizontal gap, between our buttons. Okay, the buttons are too big, so I'm going to go into dimensions and set a max width. And dimensions max width. Okay, getting there. Now this padding is too big here at the top, so I can go back to my section and change the spacing here. And again, if you define different spacing settings in styles, you could select them from here, but for now, we've just got what's out of the box. Okay, now this button they're both primary action buttons, and you'll see here that one's darker and one's lighter. I'll show you what you do by applying the theme, which I mentioned is the way to apply styles across the whole component. So we just go here to our current theme, which is light. If I change that to cover, it styles heading 1 and paragraph and button. And now I can click on this button, and instead of it being a primary button, I'm going to make it a secondary button. Okay, and we're away. It's not perfect, but I'm sure you get the idea. So some other cool things, you can preview it at different breakpoints very easily. And if you wanted to create a different version of this banner just for a specific breakpoint, you can do that as well by creating a version down here. And then you just say, this is just for a small size. And you can recreate it using just the elements you want to display that small size. So that's very cool as well. But that's basically it. So let's stage that, which enables us to then use it within Pages, and we'll publish it so that it's available. Now we jump back into our page, and I'll refresh that so that it pulls in the latest list of components. And then we can come over here, or we can click directly in the page itself and bring up our new component. Here it is. Add it into the page, and we can preview that. And hopefully it looks within QE of what we need, and it does. So that was pretty simple. Again, it's not perfect, but you get the idea how you can quickly refine that. Okay, that was our first component done. Let's jump back in here to our component menu, and let's create our second component, which is going to be our 3-card action row. All right, so I've actually created the bones of this already, and I'll show you that. It's just with straight text, and it's just a single card. Now I'm going to create a copy of this, and I'm going to make this a data source driven component. So let's duplicate. Okay, save, and let's edit it. Now this is where it starts to get pretty cool. So we'll find our card element, which is I've selected, and down here under data scope, I'm going to change it to being mapped. And I'm going to map in an existing external data source in Contentful, which I've created. Jump over to a tab. I've created a Contentful data source over here with the content width that we want to make our action cards. Okay, so let's plug that in. Okay, and now when it comes to this data collection, oops, sorry, I didn't finish that step. Okay, there we go. I had to select the actual part of the JSON structure we wanted to use. And now I can limit it to 3 because we only want 3 cards to display. There's actually only 3 bits of data in it, but we'll limit it to 3. And we're done. Now let's go into each element within the component and map it to the data source. So I've just clicked on the icon here, and for the image source, we're going to map that to our icon image. And then for the heading, I'm going to map that to our title. And then description, map that like so. And then the final step is we're actually going to link the icon here to the link within the data source. Okay, so now we've created a data source driven component. And again, we can go through the process of staging that, republishing that, and adding it to our page. And hopefully the page starts to come together. And then we've got one more piece of the component to show. So let's find our component here. Here it is. We can just drag that in and drop and preview. And we are cooking. Look at that. Okay, last component to take a look at was going to be our news carousel. And I've created that in advance. Let's jump into it here. And you can probably see I've got a data source mapped in. This is US space news or something. And what I've done is basically just say, pull that whole JSON file in and just map it to the card element and just publish them all, just bring all of it in. And so what I'm going to show you now is how you take a component with a data source that's created in one spot, but then you can reuse it and show different content in different contexts, depending on the news, in this case, the news that you want to display. So one component that shows all news, and you can show different types of news on different pages. So let me show you how we do that. So we'll go into our pages. We'll go to our, oh, it hasn't been published. Might have to publish it. Restage, sorry, republish. Hopefully it still works. We'll just see what happens if I drag it in as is. Okay, let's drag in our article carousel. So here it is. Now it's still showing everything, right? So now within the page level, within this context, I'm going to tell it what I want to show. And again, I can now limit it to 3, and that will just show the top 3, or I can specify. So I can actually select from the list of content what I want to show on this page. So I want this one, I want this one, and let's say I want that one. And that's specific to the home page. And again, you could show different content on a different page using the same component. And hopefully it's all coming together, and it is. I know the layout's not perfect, but again, you get the idea. So that's a really quick demo of the component builder and a few different ways you can use it. And so just to wrap up, I'll just go back to the deck. The results. So looking at how Sitecore's component builder went against our list of top features. So feature number 1, reusable templates and elements, a big tick. Okay, the whole idea is that you've got a library that you can easily reuse, drag and drop on any page. And it goes beyond that, because you can create a component library within XM Cloud and reuse that across multiple sites. So that gives you the ability to really quickly build out a site based on an existing component library. So it's the whole idea of having a ready-to-go starter kit. So as far as I can see, it gets a big tick with that feature. Second feature, accessible code. So I ran the page through Wave, and there was some errors, but those errors were almost all to do with missing alt attributes. And the editor itself gives you the option of defining an image alternate text. What it doesn't do is give you the option of making that mandatory. So I think that would be a good enhancement. But if you dismiss those, there was a couple of contrast issues and a template issue. But in terms of the code itself created by the component builder, there was no accessibility flags at all. So that's another tick. Responsive design, I demoed that. Really simple, powerful, responsive capability there. So another tick. Drag and drop, you saw that. It kind of works pretty well. It's a little bit fiddly sometimes if you're trying to do detailed things. There's some ways that the UI could make that a little bit simpler, but that could well come because it's a SaaS product. But it basically, once you get used to it, basically works pretty smoothly. The last thing I wanted to point out is performance. So performance is actually really good. I know the score there says 38, but that was because I was using an uncompressed image that I just dragged, like a high resolution image. So if you actually got the workflow in place that you're using optimized images, the performance of the page would be great out of the box. Okay, some final thoughts. So what is it good for? As you've seen, it ticks the boxes of the top features of a front-end service solution. So it really looks promising. There's no code UI building, which is great. I think it's a great tool for quickly building brochureware pages or landing pages where you've got the UI defined, and you can just go ahead and build or quickly prototyping sites. It's pretty fun as well. What is it limited by? There's a few things that it hasn't quite got yet. It could well come, but there's no history on components. So once you've made a change, you can't easily go back to a version that you're on. It doesn't have good user management. It can be a little bit fiddly. The biggest call out is that you can't do complicated components. So you can't have JavaScript within the component. So that's going to limit you in terms of carousels and things like that. And you can't otherwise control the markup. But as I've showed you, it's pretty good out of the box. There will be lots of use cases where it won't cut the mustard, but for simple sites, I think it does a great job. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Fantastic, Cade. That was really, really interesting. Thank you for taking the time to go through that. Yeah, I agree with Greg. Thank you.